On the morning of August 27, 1883, sailors more than 60 kilometers from a small volcanic island near Indonesia felt something hit their bodies before they heard anything at all. Then many of them permanently lost their hearing in a single instant. The sound wave that struck them had traveled faster than their brains could process what was happening, and that was still nowhere near the center of the disaster. Nearly 5,000 kilometers away, people heard the explosion so clearly, they launched search parties for ships they believed were firing distress cannons across the ocean. There were no ships. What they heard was the loudest sound ever recorded in human history. The Indonesian archipelago sits directly above one of the most violent geological systems on Earth. Beneath the islands, the Indo-Australian plate is being forced downward beneath the Eurasian plate in a process called subduction. The crust there is constantly breaking, melting, and rebuilding itself under enormous pressure. That pressure created a chain of more than 130 active volcanoes across Indonesia. But Krakatoa was different. It sat inside the Sunda Strait between Java and Sumatra, one of the weakest and most unstable sections of crust in the entire region. The magma rising beneath the island was thick, dense, and filled with trapped gas. Unlike thin flowing lava, this type of magma behaves almost like a sealed pressure chamber. The gases cannot escape easily. They build, and they keep building. Krakatoa itself was not a single volcano. It was a cluster of volcanic peaks rising from the remains of an ancient collapsed caldera, created by an earlier catastrophic eruption centuries before. By the late 1800s, the island was covered in dense jungle. Trees covered the slopes. Birds nested across the island. Ships passed it every day through one of the busiest trade routes on Earth. To most people, it looked peaceful. But volcanic silence is not safety. Sometimes, silence means pressure has stopped escaping. And Krakatoa had been silent for nearly 200 years, long enough for unimaginable energy to accumulate beneath it. The first warnings came years before the disaster. Earthquakes shook the surrounding region. Tremors became more frequent. But in the 1880s, volcanology barely existed as a science. There were no modern seismographs, no satellite imaging, no real understanding of caldera collapse. People could observe the volcano, but they could not understand it. Then, on May 20th, 1883, Krakatoa finally broke its silence. A column of ash exploded 6 kilometers into the sky. Villages heard deep thunder rolling across cloudless horizons. Ships sailing through the Sunda Strait began encountering floating fields of volcanic pumice, drifting through the water. Weeks later, black ash clouds blocked sunlight across the region for days at a time. But the eruption still did not fully explode, and that may have been the most dangerous part. Because the longer people survive beside escalating danger, the more normal the danger begins to feel. Tourist boats actually approached the volcano during the eruption. Excursion cruises carried passengers close enough to watch explosions from the water. The volcano became entertainment. That psychological effect appears constantly throughout history. When catastrophe delays itself long enough, human beings slowly stop believing it will happen at all. By August, the island had already been devastated. Forests had been flattened, ash buried the ground, steam vents ripped open across the surface. Yet even then, experts studying the island believed the eruption would eventually calm down again. They had no framework for what was about to happen. On August 26th, the eruption intensified dramatically. Ash columns climbed nearly 30 kilometers into the atmosphere. Volcanic lightning flashed continuously through the black clouds above the island. Ships near the volcano reported hot ash falling onto their decks, while the ocean itself grew strangely warm. Then came the final night, and sometime during the morning of August 27th, the entire system failed. Over roughly 20 hours, Krakatoa had emptied an enormous volume of magma from beneath the island. The chamber underground was collapsing into itself. Millions of tons of rock suddenly had nothing beneath them capable of supporting their weight anymore. At 10:02 in the morning, the island partially collapsed directly into the sea, and the Earth detonated. The explosion released an estimated energy equivalent of roughly 200 megatons of TNT. That is approximately 4 times more powerful than the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever detonated by humanity. The pressure wave expanded outward in every direction at supersonic speed, and then the sound itself became something else entirely. Normally, sound travels as vibration. Air molecules compress and expand in waves, moving outward from a source. But Earth's atmosphere has a physical upper limit for how loud ordinary sound can become. That limit is 194 decibels. Beyond that threshold, the wave stops behaving like normal sound, because the atmosphere itself cannot physically support the pressure differences anymore. The wave transforms into a shock front, a moving wall of compressed atmosphere. The Krakatoa explosion is estimated to have reached approximately 310 decibels near its source, not slightly above the limit. More than 100 decibels beyond the physical ceiling of sound itself. At 60 kilometers away, sailors aboard nearby ships suffered instantly ruptured eardrums. Some permanently lost their hearing forever. The pressure wave physically struck their bodies before the sound fully reached them. Closer to the eruption, there was no survival. The air itself became the weapon. But the sound was only part of the disaster. When the volcano collapsed into the ocean, it displaced enormous amounts of seawater almost instantly. Massive tsunamis exploded outward across the Sunda Strait. Entire coastal towns disappeared within minutes. Some waves climbed more than 40 meters high after being compressed into narrow bays and coastlines. One town vanished so completely that survivors later described ships floating where streets had existed only moments earlier. But even then, the disaster was still not finished. One of the deadliest effects came from something even stranger: pyroclastic flows. These are superheated avalanches of gas, ash, and pulverized rock, capable of moving at hurricane speeds while reaching temperatures hot enough to ignite wood instantly. Normally, water acts as a barrier against volcanic flows. Not this time. As the heavier material hit the ocean surface, it instantly flash-boiled enormous amounts of seawater into steam. That steam formed a temporary cushion beneath the flow itself. The volcanic cloud skimmed across the ocean surface. It did not stop. It did not cool. It crossed open water. Entire communities on nearby islands were erased almost instantly when the pyroclastic surge arrived from across the sea itself. Many people never even understood what was happening before they died. Then the atmosphere carried the disaster even farther. The pressure wave from Krakatoa continued expanding outward around the entire planet. In Australia, people heard the explosion clearly thousands of kilometers away. On islands near Africa, authorities launched rescue operations because they believed ships were firing distress cannons somewhere beyond the horizon. There were no ships. Barometers around the world recorded something scientists had never seen before. The atmospheric pressure wave circled the Earth repeatedly, again and again and again. The atmosphere itself had begun ringing like a bell. For the first time in recorded history, humanity observed a planetary-scale atmospheric disturbance moving through the entire global atmosphere in real time. And the eruption was still not finished, changing the planet. Krakatoa blasted enormous amounts of sulfur dioxide high into the stratosphere. Unlike normal weather systems, material entering the stratosphere can remain suspended for years because there is very little vertical mixing to pull it back down. The particles spread across the Earth. Global temperatures dropped, weather patterns shifted, sunsets changed color worldwide. People across Europe, North America, and Asia began witnessing deep red skies, so unnatural they looked almost unreal. Twilight lasted longer. The sky glowed crimson and purple long after sunset should have faded. Artists painted what they saw because many believed the atmosphere itself looked wrong. Nearly a decade later, Norwegian artist Edvard Munch described seeing a blood-red sky above the city while feeling what he called an infinite scream passing through nature. Then he painted The Scream. The sky in that painting may have been a direct consequence of Krakatoa. That means the loudest sound in recorded history did not end with the explosion. Its effects remained suspended in Earth's atmosphere for years. The disaster killed more than 36,000 people. It permanently altered climate patterns. It transformed scientific understanding of atmospheric physics. And it left traces of itself inside one of the most famous paintings ever created. But the most disturbing part is this. Krakatoa was not a unique geological accident. The same tectonic forces still exist beneath the Sunda Strait right now. In 1927, a new volcanic island called Anak Krakatau began rising from the collapsed caldera left behind by the original eruption. In 2018, part of that new volcano collapsed into the ocean and triggered another deadly tsunami that killed more than 400 people. The system is still active, still rebuilding pressure, still operating on the same geological timeline. What happened in 1883 was not the end of something. It was a reminder of what the planet is continuously capable of doing. The loudest sound in human history was not just an explosion. It was the atmosphere physically recording the moment an island tore itself apart. And for days afterward, the planet kept echoing from it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more history mysteries.